What if your greatest fear isn't dying, but reaching the end only to realize you never truly lived? What if death isn't the enemy, but the mirror that shows us how distracted, numb, and lost we've become? We live in a culture addicted to speed, achievement, and appearances. But when was the last time we paused, really paused, to ask if we're actually alive? The Stoics didn't run from this question. They made it central to their lives. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." Over 1,800 years later, Ryan Holiday echoed that same urgency. Memento Mori reminds us not to waste time, because we don't know how much of it we have. Death for the Stoics is not a horror to be avoided. It's a compass, pointing us back to what matters. In this video, we'll uncover 5 rare and powerful Stoic insights about death, drawn not only from ancient minds, but echoed today by modern thinkers who continue to live by these truths. Welcome to the Stoic Lighthouse. Let the Stoic Lighthouse guide you toward peace and wisdom. If you believe that thinking deeply is an act of courage, then like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we're about to confront the one reality no one escapes, and discover how it might just be the key to finally living. Stoic reflection. Number 1. The hard but liberating truth from Epictetus. Death is not a bad thing. Imagine you're standing in a hospital hallway, holding your breath, waiting for a doctor to speak, or scrolling through your phone and suddenly seeing that someone you knew is gone. In those moments, the illusion vanishes, and you're left face to face with reality. The truth is, we don't fear death itself. We fear the loss of what we thought was permanent. We fear having no control. But the Stoics, especially Epictetus, knew we never had control to begin with. Epictetus taught that death isn't evil, tragic, or unfair. It just is. A law of nature, a return to the cycle from which we came, just as natural as birth, as breathing, as gravity. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. And nothing triggers our judgments more than the thought of death. We imagine it stealing our future. We panic at the idea of not finishing our goals. But what if death isn't robbing us of anything, and instead reminding us that everything was borrowed to begin with? The real suffering," Epictetus argued, "isn't death. It's our resistance to it. Our refusal to accept that life was never meant to be ours forever." That's where modern thinkers like Massimo Pigliucci step in to reinforce Epictetus's wisdom. Pigliucci explains that the Stoic approach isn't cold detachment, it's courageous clarity. It's a daily practice of separating what we can influence from what we must learn to accept. Massimo Pigliucci wrote, "We suffer more than we need to because we try to control what we never could. When we let go, we begin to live." So the question is, when you hear that someone died, or when you realize you will, do you shrink into fear? Or do you pause, breathe, and remember what Epictetus would ask, is this within my control? And if it's not, can you meet it not with panic, but with presence? Here's the twist the Stoics leave us with. It's not death that defines the end of life. It's death that gives life its urgency. Every second suddenly matters. Every act becomes a choice of meaning. Because knowing that nothing lasts is exactly what makes it sacred. We don't conquer death by denying it. We conquer it by looking it in the eye and letting it shape the way we live today. Because death isn't a failure, it's the frame that holds the painting. Stoic reflection number 2, the fatal mistake, waiting for death instead of letting it guide you. Picture this, you're stuck in traffic. The sun is setting behind a blur of brake lights. You check your phone for the 5th time thinking, I'll deal with that later. That call, that apology, that dream, but what if later never comes? That's the fatal mistake the Stoic Heracles warned us about, and it's one we keep making today. We live as if we have endless time, as if tomorrow is guaranteed. We act like life is a rehearsal, not the performance. Heracles, a lesser-known but powerful voice in Stoic thought, spoke of concentric circles of connection, self, family, community, all the way to humanity. But there's one thread that cuts through every circle: death. It's not distant, it's not optional, it's not a technicality. It's here, always watching, always waiting. Yet most people treat death like an event on the distant horizon, something to worry about after they get their life together. That illusion breeds what modern author William B. Irvine calls existential procrastination. William Irvine wrote, "When we forget we're mortal, we waste our lives on distractions. But when we remember it, life sharpens, and so do we." So here's the Stoic reversal. Death isn't meant to haunt you, it's meant to guide you. Heracles taught that the awareness of death should act like a compass, not a countdown. Every decision, every conversation, every hesitation should be filtered through a single question. If I died tonight, would this reflect who I truly am? That question cuts through the noise. It ends the delay. It breaks the pattern of waiting for the right time to start living. Because once you see death not as a threat, but as a teacher, you stop making excuses. You stop living on autopilot. You stop putting your meaning on layaway. Modern Stoicism echoes this. Ryan Holiday, reflecting on Memento Mori, reminds us that we don't get to choose how long we live, but we do get to choose how we live until that moment comes. Ryan Holiday wrote, "The reminder of death is not about dying. It's about focusing, prioritizing, acting now, because later might not exist." And that's the point. If you knew death was around the corner, would you still ignore that phone call? Would you still bury your feelings? Would you still postpone your life? The Stoics weren't obsessed with death. They were obsessed with not wasting life. And if we dare to ask the same question they did, if this is my last day, what truly matters? Then maybe, just maybe, we'll finally start to live like it. Stoic reflection number 3. The paradox. Death gives meaning, not importance, to life. We spend our lives trying to matter. We chase legacy, status, and permanence, as if being remembered is what gives life its worth. But what if the true value of life isn't in how long it lasts, but in how deeply it's lived? This paradox sits at the heart of Stoic philosophy. And no one framed it more clearly than the philosopher Sextus Empiricus, a voice often overlooked in modern conversation, but essential to this truth. Sextus Empiricus posed a disarming question. If death is the absence of perception, how can it be painful? Think about that. If death is like dreamless sleep, no thoughts, no fear, no pain, then why does it terrify us so much? Because we fear the idea of death, not death itself. We fear not being in control. We fear being forgotten. We fear that nothing we did really mattered. But Sextus flips this fear on its head. If death removes perception, then it also removes anxiety. It removes pressure. It removes ego. What remains is the now. What matters is this moment, this breath, this decision. Arthur Schopenhauer, a later philosopher influenced by Stoic thought, picked up where Sextus left off. He believed that most human suffering stems from illusion, especially the illusion of immortality. By embracing our finite nature, Schopenhauer argued, we can finally focus on what is real instead of what is imagined. Schopenhauer wrote, "We begin to live when we recognize that life is short, and we stop demanding that it be otherwise." Modern Stoic authors take this even further. They warn against living in a constant state of comparison and delay, like we're saving our best self for a future that may never come. So ask yourself, are you postponing joy? Are you censoring your truth, waiting for the right time? Are you wasting your life trying to make it last longer, instead of making it mean more? Death doesn't make life important. It makes it urgent. The sunset matters not because it lasts, but because it fades. The final chapter of a book matters not because it's long, but because it brings the story into focus. The Stoics didn't see this as morbid, they saw it as liberating. Because once you realize that time is limited, you stop squandering it. You stop being so afraid of failure. You stop needing everything to be perfect. You become more human, more present, more real. And maybe that's the lesson. The goal isn't to be remembered forever. It's to be fully alive while you're still here. Stoic reflection number 4. The silent test. How do you handle the death of others? It starts with a phone call, a late-night knock, a message that doesn't need to be read twice. And suddenly, the world shifts, the air feels heavier, the chair at the dinner table is empty, the voice on the other end of the line will never answer again. This is the test the Stoics knew we'd all face, not the fear of our own death, but the unbearable reality of someone else's. Musonius Rufus, who taught philosophy not as theory but as survival, put it bluntly, "It is harder to endure the death of those we love than our own." Because when we lose someone, it's not just them that disappears. It's the future we imagined. It's the things left unsaid. It's the ordinary moments that suddenly become sacred in their absence. And in that grief, it's tempting to shut down, to grow numb, to rage, to drown. But the Stoics didn't say, "Don't feel." They said, "Feel with depth, and then let it shape you." Seneca, who lost his own family members during a time of political chaos, knew this intimately. We do not die all at once. We die in pieces as those we love are taken from us. This isn't pessimism. It's a call to presence. The death of someone close is a mirror. It shows us how distracted we've been, how often we assume we have time, and how rarely we pause to truly be with the people who matter. Grief is not an interruption of life. It's part of life. And modern Stoics like Massimo Pigliucci urge us to respond not by collapsing, but by stepping into something deeper. Massimo Pigliucci wrote, "To live like a Stoic is not to eliminate pain, it's to elevate it into meaning." So ask yourself, when someone you love is gone, how do you carry their memory? Not in silence, not in guilt, but in action. Because grief is more than sadness. It's an inheritance, not of money, but of meaning. And the question is, what will you do with it? Will you let it break you? Or will you let it build you into someone who loves harder, forgives quicker, and lives more awake? The Stoics didn't want us to repress our sorrow. They wanted us to redeem it, to take that sharp edge of pain and use it to cut away what no longer matters. So next time you feel the sting of a loss, sit with it, breathe into it, and let it ask you, are you living in a way that honors the ones who are gone? If the answer is yes, then their death hasn't taken everything. It's given something back, a new kind of strength, a deeper kind of presence. And that is how we continue loving, even after goodbye. Stoic reflection number 5, a forgotten Stoic practice, Praemeditatio, Mortis. Visualizing death to learn how to live every morning. We wake up assuming we'll get another day. We make plans. We check our schedules. We act like life sent us a calendar invite for tomorrow. But the Stoics had a practice that shattered that illusion. They called it Praemeditatio Mortis, the premeditation of death, a daily mental exercise not to invoke fear, but to invoke presence. Cleanthes, one of the earliest Stoics after Zeno, taught this as a form of lucid preparation, not obsession, not paranoia, awareness. Modern Stoics call it clarity, but the ancient ones called it truth. Before stepping out into battle or politics, Marcus Aurelius would remind himself, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you think, say, and do. That's not morbidity, that's alignment. But what does this look like today? It looks like a firefighter inspecting his gear before a shift, because this could be the last time he goes home. It looks like a parent pausing before school drop-off to say, I love you, like it matters. It looks like you, waking up and taking 5 seconds to whisper to yourself, "This could be the last time I open my eyes," and then acting accordingly. Ryan Holiday, one of the most outspoken voices of modern Stoicism, has built his life and career around this reminder. He writes these words on his desk. He wears them on his wrist because he knows the cost of forgetting. Ryan Holiday said, "Memento Mori is not about dying. It's about living with urgency, with purpose, with fire." When you start your day with death in mind, something incredible happens. You stop wasting time on petty arguments. You let go of resentment faster. You tell the truth more often. You hug longer. You scroll less. You listen more. You don't live recklessly. You live intentionally. Praemeditatio Mortis isn't about darkness. It's about illumination. It's about tearing off the blindfold and walking forward, eyes open, heart alert. Because when you imagine this could be the last time, you finally begin to treat every time like the only one that matters. So ask yourself, right now, if this day was all you had, what would you change? Who would you forgive? What would you finally begin? You don't need more time. You need more awareness of the time you already have. And that's what the Stoics knew. We don't defeat death by denying it. We transcend it by living in full color while we're still here. And so, we arrive at the end. But maybe it's not the kind of end we thought it would be. The Stoics never saw death as a villain. They saw it as a teacher, one that doesn't shout, but whispers, one that doesn't demand, but reveals. Here's what they taught us. Epictetus showed us that death isn't evil, it's our judgment that gives it power. Heracles reminded us that death shouldn't be waited on. It should be used as a guide for every decision we make. Sextus Empiricus and Schopenhauer gave us the paradox. Death removes meaninglessness, not meaning. Musonius Rufus and Seneca helped us face the loss of others, not by suppressing grief, but by living in a way that honors it. And Praemeditatio Mortis, this forgotten daily ritual, called us back to presence, intensity, and truth. You can ignore death if you want, but it will still be there. And the more you avoid it, the more it haunts you. The more you understand it, the more human, more free, more alive you become. To deny death is to live asleep. To embrace it is to wake up. So let me ask you, and be honest with yourself, if today was your last day, would you live it differently? If this reflection stirred something in you, comment below, "I choose to live with presence." Let your voice be part of this conversation. And if this message resonates, like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the Stoic Lighthouse. There's more light ahead. Even when everything feels dark, the Stoics remind us there is clarity. There is peace, there is purpose. In our next video, we'll explore a truth that most people get wrong, the dark truth about kindness, why being nice isn't always wise, and how Stoicism can help you set real boundaries without losing your humanity. So, stay with us, stay present, and remember this, you won't always have another moment, but you always have this one, and that is enough if you truly live it. Until the next video, stay grounded, stay aware, and follow the light. Let the Stoic Lighthouse guide you toward peace and wisdom.